It was October 7th, 1992, a seemingly ordinary Wednesday evening that would soon turn into a nightmare for one family. 7-year-old Nikki Allan, with her bright eyes and innocent smile, had decided to make the short journey home from her grandfather's apartment just a floor below her own. She knew the path well. It was a journey she had made countless times. As the clock struck 8:30 p.m., Nikki's small footsteps echoed through the dimly lit corridors of the building. Little did anyone know, these would be the last moments of her life as she made her way through the familiar route. Nikki Allan was born in England during the 1980s, one of 4 daughters to Sharon Henderson. They lived in a low-income housing estate in the city of Sunderland, located in Tyne and Wear, in the northeastern part of England. At 7 years old, Nikki spent her days with her 3 sisters, Stacey, 8, Sarah, 3, and Niam, 2. Sharon, despite being a loving mother, faced a series of unfortunate relationships. The father of Stacey and Nikki abandoned them, and her subsequent partner also left, failing to take responsibility for Sarah and Niam. Sharon had to work hard to provide for her children, as none of the fathers contributed to their upbringing. Fortunately, her father, who lived in the same building, was a supportive and loving grandfather. He helped Sharon with the girls whenever he could. Despite the challenges of single motherhood, Sharon ensured her daughters never lacked anything essential. Though their budget was tight, the love and dedication Sharon showed made their home a place of joy and warmth. The family cherished weekends and holidays like Christmas and Carnival, often taking outings in the eastern parts of the city. Nikki, like most children, was oblivious to their financial struggles, radiating happiness. Described as a lively and cheerful child with adventurous spirit, her brownish-red hair contrasted beautifully with her fair skin, complemented by her vibrant brown eyes and an infectious smile that made her stand out. On the evening of Wednesday, October 7th, 1992, Nikki and her sisters were being looked after by their grandfather. Around 8:30 p.m., Nikki decided to go home, which was just a floor below in the same building. It was common for one of the older girls to head home first. Nikki knew the short route well, having traversed it many times without issue. That night, Sharon returned home to find Nikki missing. Initially, this didn't raise alarm, as her other daughters, Stacey, Sarah, and Niam, had not arrived either. But when they returned without Nikki, Sharon called her father, who confirmed Nikki had left his apartment 10 minutes before her sisters. The building was a tight-knit community where everyone knew each other, and mutual support was a daily practice. Nikki was well-liked for her endearing nature. In growing worry, Sharon began knocking on neighbors' doors, asking if anyone had seen her daughter and calling everyone she knew to find Nikki. When no one could provide any information, Sharon's fear turned to dread. Nikki was missing. The community organized search parties to scour every corner of the building and its surroundings. The search went on through the night and into the early hours of the morning. Sharon's anxiety escalated into panic and desperation. As dawn broke on Thursday, October 8th, with no sign of Nikki, the family contacted the authorities. The police arrived and began a thorough search, questioning residents, Sharon, the grandfather, and anyone who might know something. A discovery that froze everyone's blood was made. Nikki's small shoes were found discarded at the entrance of an abandoned building not far from her home. With heavy hearts, neighbors and police entered the building, their dread growing with each step. The tension was palpable, likened to the calm before a storm. Inside, they found a dark, sticky stain on the floor, resembling dried blood. In the middle of it lay Nikki's lifeless body, a heartbreaking end to the frantic search. It was clear at first glance that Nikki had suffered a brutal attack. She sustained multiple wounds from a sharp weapon, and her head had been struck with a brick. The scene was heartbreaking. Nikki's fragile body lay in a pool of blood, utterly alone in an abandoned building. This moment marked the beginning of a relentless fight for justice for Nikki, a fight that she rightfully deserved. News of this horrific incident spread rapidly, shocking the entire city of Sunderland. The community was not only devastated because it involved a young, innocent child, but also because of the sheer brutality of the crime. The support for the family was overwhelming. Hundreds gathered to support Sharon and her family at the painful funeral. The media quickly picked up the story, pushing for updates on the investigation, which in turn put immense pressure on the authorities to solve the case. The police started the investigation. The entire intelligence apparatus was mobilized to find clues and testimonies that could shed light on the perpetrator. A composite sketch was created and compared with various suspects. However, as months passed, no solid leads emerged and no suspects were identified. Despite the pain and anguish, Sharon did not give up. Throughout 1992, she remained resilient, giving interviews and urging the authorities to produce results. The detectives assured Sharon of their unwavering support and the commitment of the entire Sunderland police force to find the culprit and bring them to justice. But beyond the declarations and good intentions, the path to truth was fraught with obstacles and dead ends. Yet, Sharon clung to the hope that justice would eventually be served for the tragic loss of her beloved daughter. In late 1993, the investigation focused on George Heron, a young man who lived near Nikki's home. The evidence found at his residence was troubling. A knife matching the pattern of Nikki's wounds was discovered, along with bloodstains on his shoes and clothes. George's sister provided crucial information, noting that on the night Nikki disappeared, George had spent an unusually long time in the bathroom. Although George initially denied leaving that night, 4 witnesses claimed to have seen him at nearby pubs buying Nikki's favorite chips. The police believe George used the snacks to lure Nikki to the abandoned building where she was killed. George insisted he was innocent, but he was detained as a suspect. After 3 days of intense interrogation, George confessed to Nikki's murder. This confession, though initially accepted, was later invalidated as it was obtained through coercion. All the evidence against him was circumstantial, but the police were confident they would secure a conviction. News of the arrest of the confessed killer was met with some relief, and the media quickly broadcast the development. Sharon felt a burden lifted, having spent an entire year desperately searching for her daughter's attacker, whom she described as a monster. The media detailed every aspect of the case against George, including his full name, residence, and image. However, the case against George fell apart when the court ruled his recorded confession inadmissible, citing it was obtained through police intimidation. After a brief trial, it was concluded that there was no evidence proving George's involvement in the crime, and he was declared innocent of Nikki's murder. For his protection, following public scrutiny, George was granted a new identity and relocated away from Sunderland to start anew. Nevertheless, Sharon believed in the police's version and remained convinced that George was responsible for her family's tragedy. Determined to seek justice, Sharon filed a civil suit against George in 1994, accusing him of wrongful death. The court ruled in Sharon's favor, ordering George to pay over £7,000, a sum she never received as George could not be located. Despite the setback, the police continued to investigate, gathering reports and following leads, but the case grew cold over time. 20 years after Nikki's tragic death, the case remained open but stagnant. Unexpectedly, a breakthrough emerged, offering new hope for justice for Nikki and her anguished family. In February 2014, serial offender Stephen Greaves' son, already incarcerated, became a suspect. His modus operandi in previous crimes closely matched Nikki's case. Stephen had a history of cooperating with authorities, confessing to unsolved crimes and providing valuable information on similar cases, making him a crucial resource for the investigators. However, this time, Stephen took a completely different approach. He declared his innocence and refused to cooperate with any aspect of the investigation. After decades of dead ends and false leads, hopes were pinned on the significant advancements in forensic technology of that era. Investigators conducted blood analyses to find evidence linking Stephen to Nikki's murder, but the results ultimately excluded him as a suspect. Once again, they were back to square one and had to start from scratch. This was disappointing news for the investigators and for Sharon, Nikki's mother, who had placed her hopes on this new lead. Despite the setback, Sharon didn't give in to despair. Committed to keeping her daughter's case in the public eye, she continued to give interviews to the media. Through her courageous persistence, she hoped to keep Nikki's memory alive and to maintain pressure on the authorities to fulfill their duty of ensuring justice for her little girl. As the 25th anniversary of Nikki's murder approached, Sharon made a public revelation that was both raw and heartbreaking. She admitted that she had not been a good mother to Stacy, Sarah, and Niam. She acknowledged that her other 3 daughters had grown up feeling neglected, accustomed to seeing their mother constantly dealing with the media and police, dedicating all her time and effort to keeping Nikki's case in the spotlight. Sharon's candid admission had a profound impact on the British public and sparked a wide-ranging debate about the struggles faced by those who suffer the tragic loss of a loved one and how it can affect other important areas of their lives. Moved by Sharon's public self-reproach and suffering, the community once again rallied around Nikki's case, demanding answers about the current state of the investigation and what was being done to find the culprit. The pressure on the authorities intensified, and hopes for justice for Nikki were reignited. The media also got involved, emphasizing that the quest for truth and justice for Nikki was not just a legal battle, but also an emotional and exhausting ordeal for Sharon and her family. In May 2016, Sharon received a startling call from a woman claiming to have new information about Nikki's murder. This person, who had been 12 years old at the time of Nikki's disappearance and had been babysitting near the crime scene, shared her memories and possible leads with the police. In September of the same year, Sharon launched an online petition demanding a new, thorough investigation into Nikki's case. The petition quickly gained support, garnering hundreds of signatures in less than 24 hours, reflecting the public's interest in finding answers and justice for Nikki. However, the police and judicial system seemed to move at a frustratingly slow pace. Throughout 2017, Sharon continued to press the authorities. They assured her that they were still working on the case, even if no public updates were given. Unbeknownst to many, specialists were conducting DNA tests on hundreds of men who had lived in the area at the time of the crime. This effort eventually led to a valuable lead. In October 2017, around the 25th anniversary of Nikki's death, the police announced a significant forensic breakthrough that could potentially resolve the case. They had successfully obtained a DNA sample from an unknown male, offering new hope. On April 17, 2018, the police arrested David Thomas Boyd, a 54-year-old man previously convicted of offenses against children, as a suspect in Nikki's murder. Based on new evidence gathered during 2016 and 2017, it was discovered that David had been a former neighbor of Nikki's grandfather, making him a potential suspect who fit the perpetrator's profile. The police raided a house where David lived and detained him. The authorities conducted a new round of interrogations, meticulously examining alibis and available evidence. However, lacking solid evidence directly linking him to Nikki's murder, they had to release him pending further investigation. Despite being a promising lead, the lack of conclusive evidence prevented David from being formally charged at that time. The case remained unsolved, and the search for the true culprit continued. The most devastating blow for Sharon came in 2019. The detective who had been assigned to the case from the beginning and had since become Chief Inspector of Sunderland Police was unexpectedly appointed as the new Chief of Police in Cleveland. This personnel change raised concerns about the proper continuity of the investigation, as it was unprecedented for a police chief from one city to simultaneously manage an ongoing case in another city. For Sharon, this news was a crushing setback, and she expressed her dismay publicly. As if that weren't enough, the detective was hired as part of a sensationalist television program that sought to track fugitives involved in crimes against celebrities. The scandal caused a national uproar, especially at a time when the reputation of the English police was under scrutiny due to various unfortunate events involving some law enforcement officers. Nevertheless, both the detective and the Sunderland Police Department issued a statement assuring that the investigation had not been halted and that they remained committed to finding Nikki's killer. Despite the obstacles and challenges, Sharon and the authorities' determination to achieve justice for Nikki remained unshaken. In April 2019, David was detained and interrogated once more about Nikki's case. However, the pandemic caused further delays, imposing limitations on judicial processes. Nonetheless, the police dedicated themselves to individually testing DNA samples from 839 men across the country related to the case or investigation, aiming to eliminate them as suspects. During 2020 and 2021, Sharon received new reports about potential leads and revelations from new witnesses who claimed to have unheard-of information about the case. These new clues added to the previous efforts to uncover the truth that had remained elusive for the police, especially for Sharon, who was approaching 30 years of fighting for justice for her daughter. In January 2022, the police officially referred the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, thus transferring responsibility from Sunderland police detectives to a new administrative direction, placing the case in a bureaucratic limbo, much to Sharon's dismay. Fortunately, Sharon's fears were unfounded. In May 2022, there was a significant breakthrough when David was formally charged with Nikki's murder. He appeared before the court, pleaded not guilty, but was remanded in custody. On April 20, 2023, the trial began. During the hearings, evidence against David was presented, including an animated video showing how he had dragged and disposed of Nikki's body. The prosecutor explicitly assured the jury that David was the true perpetrator of the fatal assault on Nikki. The trial continued with crucial testimonies and details about how David had lured Nikki to the site and committed the horrific acts. The prosecution presented evidence of David's DNA found on Nikki's clothing, which further strengthened the case against him. The prosecution alleged that David had taken Nikki to a wasteland by the river Ware, where he struck her on the head. They added that he had forced Nikki through an opening in a boarded-up window of the abandoned building, where he attacked her until she died. The autopsy revealed that Nikki had suffered a blunt force trauma to the head, likely rendering her unconscious before receiving the fatal stab wounds. The trial also revealed that David Boyd had been convicted in March 2000 for indecent assault on a girl in a Stockton park on April 8, 1999. He had also been convicted of public order offenses in 1986 when he approached 4 children and grabbed a 10-year-old girl. Another detail revealed during the trial was that David knew the layout of the abandoned building where Nikki was found and had used the same window days earlier when he took a boy there, supposedly to look for pigeons. The defense argued that the evidence was merely innocent coincidences and that there was no direct proof of David's guilt. David concocted a story to explain the presence of his DNA on Nikki's clothing. He claimed he had spat from his balcony on the night of the incident, and Nikki might have touched a railing where his saliva landed, then wiped her hands on her clothes, transferring the DNA. The judge explained to the jury that the case was based on circumstantial evidence, but the evidence presented so far strongly pointed to David's guilt. On May 12, 2023, after just 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found David guilty of Nikki Allan's murder. The verdict was a huge relief for Sharon and a victory for justice after decades of relentless pursuit. The man who ended Nikki's life and dreams and caused immense pain to her family would finally face justice for his cruel actions. On a day that seemed unreachable for Sharon, she finally got the results she had long awaited after 31 long years. When the court delivered the verdict declaring the man guilty, the news was met with a mix of relief and emotion, and the courtroom erupted in applause. Outside the court, under torrential rain, Nikki's family shared tears, hugs, and kisses. Despite the celebrations, there was still discontent among the family regarding the way the police investigation was conducted. Despite the historic verdict, Sharon expressed her frustration over the long wait and the fact that the man had lived freely for years without deserving it. Nikki's older sister, Stacy, recalled seeing David several times near the buildings where they lived during their childhood. She mentioned that all the children distrusted him and described him as a very creepy figure. At the time of her statements, Stacy was 39 years old and shared the profound impact finding her sister's body had on the community, as well as the immense damage to their family. As candid as her mother about the devastating effects of losing Nikki, Stacy confessed to having behavioral problems and resorted to substance abuse and rave parties to escape the pain. However, she eventually found a path to recovery and redemption. She now works helping people with substance and alcohol dependencies overcome their struggles and is also a boxing coach. The long-awaited news came on May 23, 2023. David was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 29 years before he could be eligible for parole, meaning he would only be able to apply for release on August 16, 2049. Following the verdict, the police issued an apology to 56-year-old Sharon for the failures in the original investigation and celebrated that Nikki's case was finally closed. After the news broke, Sharon spoke to BBC News about the 31 years of waiting for Nikki to receive justice. When asked about the police's apology, she said she did not accept it. She pointed out that she had repeatedly asked if they were considering David as a suspect but was never listened to. She felt abandoned by the police all those years and stated that it took a forensic DNA breakthrough to finally capture David, who should have been on the police's radar from the beginning. Adding to her indignation was the fact that she learned about the conviction through the news. In response, the police stated that they had tried multiple times to contact Sharon but could not reach her until after the media interviews. They assured that she would be given the opportunity to speak with a senior police official. Sharon responded that she preferred actions over words and urged the police to investigate other individuals she believed might be implicated in the crime. The official response to Sharon's new suspicions came swiftly.
Obviously, the one question is, everybody's asked me, why? I understand why Casey, why the boys, why your daughter.
Michael Wayne Jones was born on May 1, 1981, in the small town of Brattleboro, situated in Vermont, USA. While the identities of his parents remain unknown, it is evident that his family life was fraught with complexity and difficulty. From a tender age, Michael was a witness to the repeated physical and mental abuse between his parents, and he too was a victim of this mistreatment. These issues seem to be a tragic and enduring legacy, affecting both sides of his family. During Michael's early years, his father was incarcerated for reasons that are still unclear. This event deeply affected Michael, creating a profound sense of emptiness in his life. Seeking a fresh start, his mother remarried and had another son named Dana. Michael found some joy in having a sibling, but their home life remained far from ideal. His stepfather's inability to maintain steady employment placed the entire financial burden on his mother, who was forced to take on 2 jobs. Compounding their difficulties, Michael's stepfather exhibited aggressive behavior toward both him and Dana. The use of violent disciplinary methods created an environment of fear and oppression. If Michael arrived late to school or made a mistake, he was harshly punished, often locked in a shed and subjected to sexual abuse. Despite the harshness of his life, Michael showed a generous and protective nature. In such dire circumstances, he often took on the role of protecting Dana, sometimes enduring punishments meant for his brother to spare him the pain. This courageous and loving behavior forged a strong bond between the brothers, with Michael becoming a figure of admiration for Dana. The stepfather's control was so stringent that Michael was rarely allowed to interact with other children from school or the neighborhood. His mother, living in fear of her husband, was unable to confront or oppose him. This created an atmosphere of isolation, secrecy, and oppression within the household. Without any external support, Michael and Dana had to endure the ongoing abuse. The bleak atmosphere of their home did not go unnoticed by the neighbors, who began to suspect the presence of abuse. On one occasion, driven by desperation, Michael ran away from home. But Michael had no clear destination, so he was eventually found by the authorities. When questioned about his reasons for leaving, he shared the difficult story of his family life. However, he received no assistance regarding his situation. Despite his efforts to appear fine to those around him, Michael's true feelings were hidden beneath the surface. As he entered adolescence, his low self-esteem significantly affected him, leading to a depression that required medical treatment. The only respite from his pain was his high school. There, despite his introversion and loneliness, Michael felt somewhat at ease as responsibilities helped him forget his oppressive home life. He was fortunate to meet Dorothy, who owned a nearby business. She introduced him to her daughter, whose name remains unknown. Michael formed a friendship with the girl, which eventually turned into an on-and-off relationship. This special connection allowed Michael to reveal a kind, affectionate, and protective side of himself. Dorothy was delighted by this new facet of Michael, but was also concerned. He always seemed on edge when it was time to go home. Although Dorothy's daughter often visited him, Michael did everything he could to keep her away from his house. With so many signs, Dorothy finally decided to delve deeper in her conversations with Michael. He then confided in her about his constant worry for his mother and brother's well-being. This allowed her to glimpse the emotional burden and anguish he carried. Their friendship provided Michael with a temporary respite from his difficulties, a space where he could express his feelings. After high school, Michael made a life-changing decision by joining the United States Navy. This marked the beginning of a new chapter, providing him with a clear purpose within a highly structured environment. As he developed a deep love and attachment for the Navy, Michael realized how right his choice had been. This sense of well-being was largely due to the new friendships he formed with his fellow servicemen. Despite occasionally drinking, he always showed up for work and proved to be a calm and relaxed individual. At the time, Michael was dating a fellow service member, whose name has been kept confidential. However, it became clear that the relationship was imbalanced, as she was physically abusive. This revived old shadows of his family environment. When his relapse into depression became evident, he decided to leave her. He then focused on excelling in his career, which included undergoing additional training to provide medical care in combat situations. This earned him an assignment with the Marines in a medical role. During this period, Michael met a young woman named Sarah. They fell in love and eventually got married. Following their marriage, Michael left the Marines to focus on his new role as a husband. Sarah played a crucial role in Michael's life, helping to keep him on the right path. Together, they welcomed 3 children, and Michael dedicated himself to being a good father, always striving to provide them with the best upbringing possible. Although Sarah took the lead in many decisions, Michael consistently supported her choices. Around 2011, Sarah found a job in Central Florida, specifically in Orange County, and the family relocated there. She worked at Mount Dora Animal Hospital, managed by Beau Delaporte. As weeks went by and Michael struggled to find a job, Sarah persuaded Beau to hire him, recognizing his work experience. Michael quickly adapted to his new responsibilities and demonstrated remarkable dedication. He always exuded joy, and it was evident to everyone that he loved his work, caring for animals and attending to their owners. His positive attitude made him highly sought after, with pet owners preferring his services. His employers grew very fond of him, especially Beau, who, beyond their professional relationship, extended his friendship and trust to Michael. Beau even began to delegate some management responsibilities of the animal hospital to him. Everything was going smoothly, and in 2014, Beau hired a new veterinary technician, Casey. Born on December 23, 1986, in the city of Ossian, Indiana, Casey was the second daughter of Nikki and David. Her siblings were Sarah and Brandy. From a young age, Casey was undoubtedly the heart of her home, her overflowing energy lifting everyone's spirits, even beyond her family. As she grew, Casey showed great love for others, driven by a special connection to her spirituality. No matter the challenges, her strength lay in her faith and personal values. During her time at high school, Casey met Richard. Initially, their attraction was mutual. However, after dating for a few weeks, Richard began to notice certain behaviors in her. Despite her kind side, Casey also exhibited jealousy and possessiveness. Her insecurity led to an abusive side, expressed through words and actions. Nonetheless, Richard persisted, and with patience and calm, they married after completing their studies. Over time, Casey's mother decided to move to Florida, and shortly after, Sarah and Brandy followed her. Given Casey's close relationship with her family, she and Richard also relocated to the same state in 2009. As they settled in, Casey found occasional jobs as a transporter and sometimes worked as a dog groomer while learning the trade of a veterinary technician. During this period, the couple welcomed their first child, Cameron, and their happiness was evident. Cassie showed immense maternal devotion, making Cameron's well-being her top priority. A few years later, their joy grew even more with the birth of their second child, Preston. The children thrived in an ideal environment, filled with laughter and the loving care of their parents. As Casey advanced in her veterinary technician career, she found a job at an animal clinic where she met Michael, who had become Beau's right-hand man. From the beginning, Michael and Casey got along exceptionally well, but Beau and his wife sensed that their apparent friendship hinted at something more. This attraction, despite being inappropriate given the circumstances, was undeniable for Michael, even at the risk of being discovered by Sarah. The inappropriate attraction affected Michael's focus at work, leading to a decline in his performance, although he was always eager to meet Casey's needs and requests. She reciprocated his attention, and it wasn't long before they embarked on an affair. Eventually, both decided to divorce their respective spouses. Sarah gained custody of their 3 children and moved to Jacksonville, while Casey and Richard agreed on shared custody with fixed schedules that Casey strictly adhered to. She took responsibility for transporting Cameron and Preston, diligently fulfilling her parental duties. Meanwhile, Beau grew increasingly frustrated with Michael's declining performance. Additionally, Michael made inappropriate advances toward other clinic employees. When Michael requested leave to travel to his hometown, claiming his mother's death, Beau later discovered it was a ruse for a beach vacation. This betrayal led Beau to terminate Michael's employment. In retaliation, Michael broke into the clinic, stealing money, computer equipment, and even a weapon. Beau identified Michael as the culprit and reported him to the police. With Casey's help, Michael fled to New Mexico but was eventually captured and brought to justice. However, after a brief stint in prison, he was released. Despite everything, Casey's trust in Michael remained unshaken. They soon moved in together, and Michael took on the role of stepfather to Cameron and Preston. By 2017, around Halloween, Michael and Casey finally tied the knot and moved into a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom trailer. Despite the limited space, the modest rent made them feel fortunate to have each other. That same year, they welcomed their first daughter, Mercali, followed by Ayana the next year. While Michael worked as a construction laborer to support their 4 children, Casey took pride in her role as a homemaker. She cherished every stage of her children's growth and sought ways to preserve those unique moments. This led her to create a YouTube channel to share special milestones of their family. On the surface, their life seemed idyllic, with Michael exuding calmness and Casey's laughter often heard in the background of their videos. However, behind closed doors, the couple frequently clashed, and their arguments had become a constant issue. Distrustful of Michael, Casey made a habit of checking his phone. She also grew suspicious whenever he worked long hours. On the night of July 10, 2019, while the children slept, a heated argument erupted between them. The trigger was Casey's discovery of a supposed infidelity on Michael's phone. The confrontation quickly escalated from verbal to physical. In a fit of rage, Casey grabbed a baseball bat and shoved Michael with it. Overcome with anger, Michael managed to wrest the bat from her and in a blind fury struck her repeatedly, ultimately killing her. Michael then placed Casey's body in a plastic bag and stored it in a closet. He attempted to clean up the scene as best as he could. The next morning, he decided to take further steps to avoid the children discovering what had happened. He loaded her remains into his car. In the following days, to avoid suspicion, Michael continued to share content on Casey's social media accounts. On July 26th, pretending to be Casey, he texted Richard asking him to take care of Preston and Cameron. He did the same with Casey's mother, instructing her to look after Mercalli and Ayanna. When Richard came to pick up Cameron and Preston, he found Casey's absence strange and voiced his concerns to Michael, who brushed it off, saying she had left town for a few days. Casey's mother had a similar reaction when she came for Mercalli and Ayanna. That same day, Michael called Sarah, telling her that he was separating from Casey and needed to see his children while she worked. Later, he picked them up and took them to his residence. During the drive, the children noticed a foul odor in the car, similar to rotting meat. For 2 weeks, Michael continued to drive between his home and Sarah's residence to visit his children, all while Casey's lifeless body remained in the car. As days passed without any word from her daughter, Casey's mother began to sense that something was wrong. On August 10th, Richard returned Cameron and Preston to Michael, and this time, Casey's absence caused him much greater concern. During their brief conversation, Michael apologized for being the cause of their divorce and acknowledged the challenges Richard had faced during his time with Casey. As the new school year approached, Michael realized that the absence of the children and Casey would raise questions from the elementary school staff. One night, on an unspecified date, he dragged Cameron out of bed and suffocated him, then placed his body in a suitcase. The next morning, he did the same with Preston, this time putting the body in a garbage bag. A few days later, the trailer park owner served Michael an eviction notice, giving him a maximum of 2 weeks to leave. Amid this grim situation, Michael went to pick up Mercalli and Ayanna. When Casey's mother saw him again, still without Casey, she had a nervous breakdown. Her mind was fixated on one question: where was her daughter? As Michael drove with the girls, he was suddenly overwhelmed with guilt. He felt he had no choice but to turn himself in at a police station. However, after lingering at the entrance for a while, he changed his mind and drove back home. Once there, he filled the bathtub with water and drowned Mercalli and Ayanna. After they stopped breathing, he placed their bodies in a plastic container. By early September, the approach of Hurricane Orion led to a state of emergency being declared in Florida. Many sought refuge in public shelters to protect themselves from the impending disaster. This situation provided Michael an opportunity to flee with the 5 bodies. He loaded them into his truck and drove north, planning to stay with Sarah and his children. Despite the ongoing emergency in Florida, Sarah never saw Michael call his wife or inquire about the children. This made her uneasy, but aware of the marital issues, she chose not to ask questions. After the hurricane passed, Michael's neighbors reported a foul smell coming from the trailer to the property owner. Assuming the Jones family had already left, the owner first peeked through the windows and then entered the trailer. Aside from the furniture and personal belongings, nothing seemed amiss, but the stench was unbearable. By this time, Casey's, desperate to find an explanation for her daughter's absence, speculated that Michael might be in trouble with the law again and was hiding. She concluded that her daughter might be in hiding for safety reasons, but instead of staying idle, she contacted the sheriff's office to request a welfare check on Casey. When the officers conducted the welfare check, they found the house empty and seemingly recently cleaned. However, the presence of cleaning supplies near the door contrasted with the persistent smell of decomposition. Despite this, the property owner arrived and asked the officers to leave. Meanwhile, with the body still in his vehicle, Michael left Sarah's house and drove across the state border into Georgia. There, near a wooded area, he disposed of Cameron, Preston, Mercalli, and Ayanna. While driving on the highway and checking his GPS, Michael lost control of his vehicle and crashed. Surprisingly, he emerged unscathed, but the vehicle was completely wrecked. Police officers quickly arrived at the scene and immediately noticed the terrible odor coming from the truck. When they opened the suitcase, they were met with a horrifying sight: Casey's remains. There, on the roadside and under the shocked gaze of the authorities, Michael confessed in detail to his gruesome actions, including the location of the children. Consequently, he was taken into custody. Upon hearing the news, Casey's family felt as though their world had collapsed. In a state of shock, they could not stop asking themselves how a human being could inflict so much harm on others, especially on babies. For the first time in her life, Sarah experienced hatred towards someone, as she later stated. However, the thought that Casey might have witnessed her children's deaths caused her the most pain. Based on the findings and armed with a search warrant, the agents returned to Casey's residence. Upon entering, besides the smell, they noticed a reddish stain on the carpet. They prepared to collect evidence at the scene. Meanwhile, the autopsies were being performed. According to the forensic report, Cameron had a fractured jaw but no other visible signs of trauma. However, a towel was found in his mouth. Preston had a noose around his neck. Mercalli and Ayanna were found together in a small plastic bag containing a baby bottle labeled Ayanna and a pair of pink sandals. Both had died by drowning. As for Casey, there was crushing on the front of her skull and face, indicating a blow with a blunt object, but no other traumas were found on her body. Michael agreed to be interviewed by the officers, and during the process he remained calm and precise in his responses, making no attempt to deceive the agents. On the contrary, Michael thanked the officers for capturing him, stating that there was nothing more he could do given the circumstances. Calmly, he then recounted the events chronologically, from the night of the fight with Casey to his subsequent arrest. When asked about the motive behind his actions, Michael responded that everything had accumulated in his life to the point where it seemed like the best and only way out. Beyond the logical impact of such a tragedy on everyone involved, it was particularly hard and cruel for Sarah to accept that her own children had been exposed to and lived with a man like Michael. Understandably, after learning the facts, Sarah suffered from mental health issues. Michael was charged with second-degree murder for Casey's death and 4 additional counts of first-degree premeditated murder for the deaths of the children. He pleaded guilty. This plea avoided a trial, moving the case directly to the sentencing phase. In this phase, a jury of 12 people had to decide between life imprisonment or the death penalty. As part of their strategy, the defense focused on Michael's difficult childhood and his mental health issues, presenting various psychological disorders as mitigating factors. However, the state prosecutors argued that the undeniable brutality of the case warranted the death penalty. In January 2023, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty in accordance with state law. During a brief 9-minute hearing, the judge sentenced Michael for his crimes. Additionally, he was given life without parole for Casey's murder. Michael's lawyer immediately filed the necessary paperwork to appeal the sentence. Despite this last effort on Friday, April 28, 2023, the judge upheld the previous sentence. Prosecutors expressed their satisfaction with the justice served for the victims' families. As he awaits execution, Michael remains behind bars. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Before the summer of 1988, the Carr family led an idyllic life in the small town of Alturas. Known for their unwavering faith, they attended church every Sunday and were the epitome of a peaceful, trouble-free family. However, this serene existence was shattered on June 14th when 16-year-old Dwayne discovered a menacing letter in their mailbox. The anonymous note was stark and terrifying, demanding the family leave Florida or face deadly consequences. Understandably shaken, Dwayne rushed to show his parents. His mother, Peggy, was immediately gripped by fear, while her husband, Allan, dismissed it as a cruel joke. As summer turned to fall, the family's unease grew, culminating on October 23rd. Peggy suddenly fell gravely ill, plagued by severe nausea and excruciating pain. Her once vibrant hair began to fall out in alarming amounts. Despite the worsening symptoms, Allan refused to take Peggy to the hospital, believing it was just a passing illness. But Peggy's condition rapidly declined. Within a week, she slipped into a coma. To the family's horror, Dwayne soon began exhibiting the same symptoms as his mother. The situation reached a critical point, prompting a police investigation. On December 2nd, authorities uncovered a shocking revelation. The family's sickness was caused by thallium, a lethal chemical commonly found in rat poison. Tests confirmed that every member of the Carr family, including Allan, had dangerously high levels of this poison in their systems. As the investigation deepened, the chilling realization set in. Someone was systematically targeting the Carr family. The letter was no prank. It was a harbinger of the terror to come. The race was now on to identify the perpetrator and stop them before they could strike again. The year was 1988. 16-year-old Dwayne lived a blissful life with his family in the serene town of Alturas, Florida. His mother, Peggy, worked tirelessly as a waitress at the local diner. After raising 3 children on her own, Peggy finally found love with Allan Carr, who brought 2 more children into their blended family. Their life in Alturas seemed perfect. A quiet town where no one locked their doors, an ideal place to raise a family. But on October 23rd, their lives took a tragic turn. In the early hours, Peggy left for work as usual. However, soon after arriving at the diner, she began to feel a burning sensation in her legs and feet, followed by intense chest pain. She was rushed to the hospital, almost incapacitated. Despite thorough testing, doctors couldn't pinpoint the cause of her illness and sent her home with pain medication. A week later, on October 30th, the nightmare escalated. Peggy, Dwayne, and his stepbrother Travis were all rushed to the hospital with identical symptoms. The pain was unbearable, leaving them in tears thinking they were going to die. Peggy was admitted to the intensive care unit. An infectious disease specialist noticed something alarming. Peggy's hair was falling out in clumps, a sign that pointed to possible poisoning. He decided to test for thallium, a deadly poison banned in the U.S. in 1972, but still present in old rat poison. The test results were horrifying. Peggy had 50 times the lethal amount of thallium in her system. The next day, October 31st, she fell into a coma. Travis was put on a respirator and Dwayne showed no signs of improvement. The police launched an urgent investigation. Their goal was clear: find the source of the poisoning to prevent further harm. They scoured the orange groves, tested the neighborhood water supply, and even examined the diner where Peggy worked. Yet, no traces of thallium were found. As news spread, panic gripped the community. People demanded answers, fearing for their own safety. Investigators descended upon the Carr home, meticulously collecting dust samples and gathering over 400 household items for lab analysis. One of these items raised alarm bells: a six-pack of Coke bottles, 3 of which remained unopened. Tests revealed that each contained more than a gram of thallium, enough to kill an adult. The detective in charge quickly realized there were only 2 possible scenarios. The first involved product tampering at the Coke factory. If that were the case, how many more people might have consumed the poison? The potential spread could reach far beyond the county, possibly affecting the entire state or even the nation. Fear spread rapidly, with locals terrified to drink Coke. The investigation's initial focus was on the bottling company. However, with Coca-Cola's cooperation, large-scale tampering was swiftly ruled out. It was deemed physically impossible to tamper with the product at the plant. This left the police with only one conclusion: this was a targeted attack on Peggy Carr and her family. The investigation turned inward, examining family members closely. Peggy's husband, Allan Carr, emerged as a primary suspect. Despite being married for only 7 months, the couple's honeymoon period had been short-lived. Allan worked long hours at the mine, and Peggy had grown suspicious. One night, she discovered him with another woman. Adding to the suspicion, the weekend Peggy first fell ill, Allan was conveniently out of town. Upon his return, he resisted taking her to the hospital. As investigators delved deeper into Allan's background, they sought any motive that might explain why he would poison his wife. Despite his troubling behavior, one question nagged at the police: why would Allan poison his own son, Travis? During interrogation, Allan revealed a puzzling clue. On June 14th, 4 months before Peggy fell ill, Dwayne found a letter in the mailbox. The letter contained a yellow post-it with a threatening typewritten note, warning the family to leave Florida within 2 weeks or face death. Dwayne and his siblings initially laughed it off, but Allan's dismissive attitude now seemed more suspicious. The police later learned that this was not the first ominous incident in the Carr household. A few years prior, 2 of their dogs had died suddenly, both exhibiting symptoms of severe illness and hair loss. This led to a chilling suspicion: they might have been used for experimentation. As Peggy's health continued to deteriorate and Dwayne and Travis showed no signs of improvement, the entire family underwent testing for thallium. The results were far more alarming than anyone anticipated. Every member of the household, including Allan Carr, had traces of thallium in their system. This revelation cleared Allan as a suspect, as it seemed implausible that someone with the knowledge to commit such a crime would risk ingesting the poison themselves. Even Peggy's 2-year-old granddaughter, Casey, had traces of thallium. On March 3, 1989, after 5 months of suffering, Peggy's condition reached its tragic conclusion. Dwayne was called to her bedside for the final time as the family faced the heartbreaking decision to remove her from life support. Peggy Carr passed away at the age of 41, leaving the family devastated. With Peggy's death, the investigation took a new turn. It was now a murder case. Poisoning someone is a rare and calculated method of murder, often devised by a demented yet brilliant mind. The FBI's examination of the contaminated Coke bottles revealed tiny scratch marks, indicating they had been meticulously tampered with. The thallium had been added, the caps resealed, and the bottles appeared untouched. Thallium, being tasteless and odorless, dissolves easily but usually causes noticeable changes in soda. However, the mixture found in the Coke bottles was sophisticated, avoiding typical signs like overflow, discoloration, or sediment. This pointed to the work of someone with advanced knowledge of chemistry, a highly intelligent individual who believed they were smarter than everyone else. Police began questioning neighbors and townspeople. Alturas, a small community of a few hundred residents, saw every single person interviewed as investigators sought to uncover the perpetrator behind this heinous act. The closest neighbors to the Carr family were George Trepal and his wife, Diana. When the detectives questioned Trepal, his reaction was shockingly harsh. Trepal launched into a tirade about the redneck children and family living next to him. When asked why anyone would want to poison the Carr family, Trepal's response was unsettlingly specific. Someone wanted them to leave. This echoed the exact message in the threatening letter received by the Carrs, a detail only known to law enforcement. This peculiar response made Trepal a prime suspect. Further investigation revealed that George Trepal was a self-taught chemist, while his wife Diana held a master's degree in chemistry. Both were members of an elite society for individuals with IQs in the top 2% of the population. Digging deeper, investigators discovered Trepal had a criminal background. He had served time in prison for being the chemist in a major methamphetamine operation. One of the ingredients commonly used in producing methamphetamine is thallium. The spotlight on George Trepal as a person of interest shocked even Peggy's son, Dwayne, who couldn't believe Trepal was capable of such a heinous act. The detectives uncovered that Trepal had previously had a confrontation with the Carr family over loud music. Just 48 hours after this argument, Peggy Carr was poisoned. Despite these connections, the police lacked concrete proof to arrest Trepal. Standard police procedure often involves bringing a suspect in for questioning, hoping for a confession. However, detectives believed this approach wouldn't work with Trepal, an introverted and non-confrontational individual. Instead, the FBI proposed a different strategy. Someone had to go undercover to outsmart Trepal. The police assigned Special Agent Susan Gorick to infiltrate the group to which George Trepal belonged. The aim was to gain Trepal's trust and gather enough evidence to prove his involvement in the poisoning. Initially, it seemed that Detective Susan Gorick would only need to go undercover for a weekend. However, she was warned about Trepal's photographic memory. If he saw them, he could remember their cars or faces. Under an assumed identity, Susan prepared to attend a murder mystery gathering hosted by George Trepal and his wife, Diana. Susan Gorick transformed into a woman on the verge of divorcing an abusive husband. On April 14, 1989, she headed to the local hotel where the event was being held. Upon arrival, she was greeted by none other than George Trepal himself. Face to face with the suspected killer, Susan's biggest fear was that Trepal might recognize her from previous surveillance operations. She took a deep breath, searching for any sign of recognition in his eyes, but Trepal didn't seem to recognize her. Nevertheless, Susan had to remain vigilant. In her undercover role, Susan knew Trepal was not the type to confront directly. He was the kind who would poison his victims, causing a slow and painful death. The risk was immense. Introducing herself as Sherry Gwynn, she registered for the event and received a packet containing the weekend's information, prepared by Tripal himself. The pamphlet detailed several well-planned murder scenarios, one of which involved poisoning. One paragraph in particular stood out. It mentioned that when a death threat appears on the doorstep, prudent people throw out all their food and watch what they eat. The message was strikingly similar to the one the Carr family had received before Peggy was poisoned. This eerie similarity convinced Susan she had the right suspect. Throughout the weekend, Susan engaged Tripal in conversation, carefully watching every word he said, knowing one slip could cost her life. When Tripal asked about her background, Susan mentioned her fictional husband, a lawyer from Houston, Texas, and how she had left him. Tripal shared how he could tell when someone was lying by the way their neck muscles moved, making Susan even more nervous. Before the weekend ended, she confided in Tripal that she intended to move to Florida to escape her husband. This revelation led to a crucial breakthrough. Tripal mentioned that he and his wife were considering moving her practice and selling their house. After consulting with her supervisors, Detective Susan was instructed to continue her undercover operation beyond the initial weekend. Susan knew this extended mission was her chance to find crucial evidence that could secure a search warrant for Tripal's house. She hoped to discover lab equipment or chemicals that would link Tripal to the crime. The following week, Susan visited Tripal's house. During the tour, Tripal mentioned how safe Alturas was, boasting that no one locked their doors. Although Susan noticed several suspicious items, including a secret passageway in the library and a mannequin with bondage gear, none were sufficient for a search warrant. Despite the failed plan, Susan maintained her Sherry Gwynn persona, determined to gather more evidence. She was acutely aware of the risks. Exposing her true identity could lead to her and her family's harm. Tripal, a highly intelligent individual, could easily resort to poisoning her if he discovered she was an undercover detective. Over the next several months, Susan met with Tripal for a series of lunch dates, always under surveillance. She never ate or drank anything after leaving the table, wary of Tripal's potential to harm her. During these meetings, Tripal gradually revealed his disdain for people he considered less intelligent, giving Susan insights into his mindset. After 8 months, Susan had collected numerous small pieces of evidence, but not enough to build a solid case. Her supervisors began to question the operation's value, threatening to shut it down. To Susan, failure was not an option. She was driven by the need to secure justice for Peggy Carr and her family, imagining how it could have been her own loved ones who drank the poison. In December 1989, Susan received the breakthrough call she had been waiting for. George and Diana Tripal had moved out of town and offered Sherry Gwynn the chance to move into their home. Without needing a warrant, Susan now had legal permission to enter the house and invite the county crime scene unit to investigate. Believing Tripal was too clever to leave obvious traces of thallium, the team focused on finding residue in places like the air conditioning filter or drains. The house was still filled with Tripal's belongings, providing ample opportunities for collecting samples. In the garage of George Tripal's house, investigators collected vials and chemistry bottles, hoping one would test positive for thallium. As they awaited results from the FBI lab, Susan continued her role as Sherry Gwynn, even as ideas and scenarios to engage Tripal ran thin. Time was running out. By January 1990, with no news from the lab, Susan knew she had to take action. She decided to try and trick Tripal into incriminating himself, unaware that Trapal was also preparing a trap for her. Susan arranged a meeting with Trapal at a picnic area behind a McDonald's in Sebring, the town where he was living. This critical meeting was recorded on tape. During their conversation, Susan handed Trapal a business card claiming it was left by detectives searching for him. Trapal's behavior changed noticeably. He became extremely nervous. His agitation was palpable as he tried to maintain composure. He repeatedly asked Susan to come over to his new house, which she declined. The tension was high. What might have happened if she had agreed to visit his home? After the meeting, Trapal walked away visibly shaken, his nerves clearly frayed by the news Susan had shared. This encounter marked a turning point. On April 4, 1990, Susan received an unexpected call. The FBI had found thallium in one of the vials collected from Trapal's garage. Specifically, it contained thallium nitrate, the exact compound used in the poisoning of Peggy Carr and the attempted murder of her entire family. This discovery was the crucial piece of evidence needed to solidify the case against Trapal. The following day, April 5th, George Trapal was arrested at his new home in Sebring. The sight of Trapal being escorted in an orange jumpsuit into the county jail marked the end of a long and dangerous investigation. The same man Susan had to trust during her undercover mission was now facing justice for his crimes. Even when confronted with the truth about her identity, George Trapal remained unfazed. Susan, now revealing herself as S. Special Agent from the county sheriff's office, served him with a warrant for handwriting samples. Trapal simply smiled and responded, "Oh, okay." Unbeknownst to Susan, she had narrowly escaped becoming Trapal's next victim. When police searched Trapal's home in Sebring, they made a shocking discovery. Behind a pegboard, they found a hidden room with no inside door handle and a sealed, soundproof window. Inside, there was a platform bed equipped with wooden stirrups and a pulley system designed to lift people. Trapal had been constructing a bed for torture. The realization of what could have happened if she had visited his home was horrifying for Susan. In January 1991, as George Trapal's trial began, the jury was presented with overwhelming evidence. Among the items collected from Trapal's house was a journal titled General Poisoning Guides, which described thallium as the poison of choice for criminals. The journal contained references to getting rid of neighbors, and 55 fingerprints in the journal matched Trapal's. The prosecution also showcased the tools used to tamper with the Coke bottles. A set of tiny screwdrivers, one of which was missing, perfectly matched the tool marks on the bottle caps. This damning evidence shocked the jury. Throughout the trial, Trapal remained calm and emotionless, sometimes even smiling. His lack of remorse and his calculated actions demonstrated a chilling level of evil. He had justified his heinous acts with his belief in his superior intelligence and the idea that those less intelligent did not deserve to live. The trial lasted 2 months, but it only took the jury 4 hours to reach a verdict. On March 6, 1991, nearly 2 years after Peggy Carr's death, George Trapal was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. The final sentence was delivered with gravitas. The defendant, George James Trapal, shall be electrocuted until he is dead. With these words, justice was served for Peggy Carr. Special Agent Susan's relentless dedication and bravery brought a criminal mastermind to justice. She risked everything, putting her life on the line to ensure Trapal faced the consequences of his heinous actions. Reflecting on Susan's efforts, one cannot help but admire her courage. She went above and beyond to bring Peggy's killer to justice, earning the respect and gratitude of many. The rest of Peggy Carr's family, who were also poisoned, made full recoveries. However, the loss of Peggy had a profound impact on her son, Dwayne. Losing his mother at the tender age of 16 was a traumatic experience that left deep emotional scars. In the years following her death, Dwayne struggled with grief, often expressing it through anger and outbursts. Eventually, Dwayne found solace in writing to his mother. In a heartfelt letter, he poured out his emotions. "Dear Mom, this is your baby boy. I'd like to tell you that I love you and I'm sorry for all the bad things I've ever done to you. Hopefully, you're in a better place now. I often think about you and wish you were here. I haven't been so good and I'm sorry. I'll try to get my life straight." Dwayne made good on his promise. Today, he is married and has become the father figure his own family deserves. Every day, he strives to make his mother proud and keep her memory alive. Dwayne Dauberly stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, showing that even after unimaginable tragedy, a life worth living is possible. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
We are very grateful and relieved that an arrest has been made in connection with Rachel's murder. Rachel was a mother, daughter, sister, and a friend. Rachel's absence from our lives has left many broken hearts and great devastation.
Rachel Pernosky was born on June 15, 1994, in Mission, British Columbia, Canada. Details about her early life are scarce, but it's known that she grew up surrounded by the love of her mother and sister. Those who knew Rachel as a child with beautiful green eyes often commented on her infectious laughter, which could brighten anyone's day. Information about her father is limited. It's only known that he was far from exemplary, had multiple relationships, and fathered several children with different women. Rachel was always friendly and well-liked. At one point in her life, she maintained a close relationship with her half-brother on her father's side, Matthew Pernosky, who was nearly 10 years older than her. Matthew was born in 1985 when his mother was only 18. His parents separated when he was young, and at 2 years old, he was sent to live with his father and stepmother. When he was 11, he returned to his mother's home, apparently due to conflicts with his stepmother. Matthew claimed that his stepmother physically abused him, hitting him with spoons while his father did nothing to protect him. Feeling unprotected, Matthew eventually moved back with his mother, resulting in almost no further contact with his father. As time went on, Matthew found it increasingly difficult to connect with people. He left his mother's home and moved in with his grandparents, who later divorced. During his youth, he was sexually abused by an older neighbor, a secret he kept to himself. Matthew felt blamed for his grandparents' separation and believed his mother had abandoned him early in his childhood and saw him as a burden when he returned during his teenage years. Additionally, he felt rejected by his father. This combination of negative emotions significantly impacted him. After many years of not communicating with his father, Matthew attempted to reconnect by providing his contact information, but he never heard back. During this period, he maintained a relationship with his stepbrother and lived with him at their grandfather's house for a while after both had left their father's home. However, this arrangement didn't last long, as they were both eventually kicked out of their grandfather's house. Amidst these complex situations, Matthew did not finish high school. However, he managed to attend a diploma program at a university and obtained a securities license. In his early 20s, Matthew's father separated from the stepmother who had abused him during his childhood. Matthew hoped this would improve their relationship, but it did not. In his early 20s, he struggled to overcome the pain and anger from the rejection he experienced from his grandfather and mother, who insisted he needed psychological help, believing his perspective was distorted. However, Matthew resisted seeking professional help. It appears he was diagnosed with depression at the age of 20, but did not take any medication or attend therapy to address it. Instead, he turned to less conventional methods to cope with his pain, leading him to substance abuse. His already erratic behavior worsened due to these habits, resulting in actions he would later regret. Turning back to the life of Rachel, Matthew's half-sister, it is known that her life was also challenging, but she had the unconditional love of her mother and sister. The charming girl fell in love at a young age and became pregnant. She and the baby's father welcomed the child, named Marco, as a blessing, though they did not live together. At 18, Rachel was going through a difficult time, living in a basement suite in Mission and being unemployed. Marco, who was a year old at that time, lived with his father and paternal grandmother since Rachel couldn't provide the quality of life he deserved. However, she remained a loving mother who kept in close contact and visited her son on Fridays and Sundays. In mid-March 2013, Rachel had planned to go shopping with a friend. When Rachel failed to show up, her friend became worried and contacted Brittany, Rachel's sister. Brittany immediately went to the basement apartment Rachel occupied to check on her. Upon arrival, she found no signs of forced entry, but two things were unusual. Rachel's cell phone was left at home, and music was playing. It was out of character for the young mother to leave without her phone or to leave the radio on. The family informed the police about her disappearance, stating that the teenage mother was last seen on March 16, 2013, at her home in Mission. Shortly before her disappearance, Rachel had been active on various social media accounts, posting photos on Instagram and tweeting about incidents in her hometown. She had no history of running away, prompting the police to categorize her disappearance as concerning. Rachel's neighbor recalled seeing her wearing jeans with sparkly decorations on the back pockets and a purple sweater. Rachel was at her house in Mission, smoking and drinking with a man in a baseball cap around midnight on Saturday. The neighbor, who was also outside smoking a cigarette with her husband, didn't notice anything unusual or felt the need to call the police, as it seemed like Rachel was just having a friendly conversation. By 1 a.m., the neighbor looked outside again and saw that the pair had left. The following Sunday, volunteers cleaning up the northeast corner of the highway informed the police they had found clothing matching the description of what Rachel was last seen wearing. However, police investigations determined that the clothing found was not related to Rachel's case. The family was desperate due to her unusual absence. Unfortunately, after days of exhaustive searching by family, friends, and police, Rachel's body was discovered on Tuesday night. Her body was found in a ditch about 30 miles from her home by a passerby who saw it from the road and called the police. Due to the difficult terrain, a search and rescue team was called to retrieve Rachel's body. The detective stated that the initial search effort involved 25 officers but didn't anticipate the case ending in homicide. Sergeant Jennifer Pound of the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, Canada's largest homicide unit, said in a press conference that although Rachel's murder didn't appear random, the police had no suspects in custody and no definitive motive. However, she clarified that they were not idle and had already interviewed several individuals. Officer Jennifer noted that it was still unclear whether the young woman was killed at the location where her body was found or if she had been dumped there. She added that the social media accounts Rachel frequently used could be crucial in identifying the killer. The results of the autopsy were expected within hours but would not be made public due to the ongoing investigation. Sergeant Jennifer also stated that Rachel's murder had left a void in her family, made even more painful by the fact that she had left behind a small child. She urged anyone with information that could help solve the case to come forward to the police. 2 days after Rachel's body was discovered, over 300 people braved the wind to pay tribute to the young woman at a heartfelt vigil in Heritage Park, Mission. Among the attendees were the father of Rachel's child, who held their baby in his arms, along with other family members, friends, and community members. The atmosphere was filled with sorrow and disbelief, as many of those present had participated in the search for Rachel and never imagined it would end so tragically. Speakers at the vigil remembered Rachel for her positive attitude and sense of humor. Despite the initial outpouring of grief and tributes, time marched on. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. Life went on for everyone, while the case seemed to stagnate or be forgotten, at least in the eyes of Rachel's family. What they didn't know was that detectives had been diligently working behind the scenes, relentlessly gathering evidence to bring the perpetrator to justice. The most shocking revelation was the direction the investigation had taken and the closeness of the perpetrator to the victim. On June 23, 2016, there was enough evidence to support charges related to Rachel's murder, and on June 24th, the responsible party was arrested without incident. On June 27, 2016, after 3 years of investigation, the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team announced that they had sufficient evidence to support the charges. The accused turned out to be none other than Rachel's half-brother on her father's side, who was 27 years old at the time of the murder. Matthew, then 31 and residing in Richmond, was charged with second-degree murder, along with a second, particularly heinous charge: desecration of a corpse for having sexual contact with Rachel's dead body and disposing of it. Sergeant Jennifer stated that it was a tragic case that had left a family with many unanswered questions. She clarified that from the beginning, the investigative bodies had worked together to follow the evidence and bring charges. She mentioned that it took 3 solid years of dedication and commitment from all the investigators involved to achieve justice for Rachel. She noted that Matthew had been considered a person of interest from the start of the investigation, but they needed to carefully piece together all the facts to avoid jeopardizing the extensive efforts made. A statement written on behalf of Rachel's family was also read, expressing their gratitude and relief at the arrest of the suspected killer, though the wait for justice continued. The start of the trial was delayed longer than Rachel's family had hoped. It wasn't until 2018 that the case finally went to court. Just as the trial was set to begin, Matthew, her half-brother, pleaded guilty to her murder. Matthew's guilty plea resulted in an automatic life sentence, but a judge during the sentencing hearing had to decide how long he should remain behind bars before being eligible for parole. For second-degree murder, the sentence typically ranges from 10 to 25 years. The Crown's lawyers and the defense attorneys presented a joint recommendation to the court in June 2018, suggesting that Matthew could be eligible for parole after serving 13 years in prison. On July 4, 2018, as scheduled, the sentencing hearing took place in the British Columbia Supreme Court. Wendy Stephen, representing the Crown, recounted that Matthew was arrested and charged following an operation called Mr. Big, in which an undercover agent posed as the head of a criminal organization. Details of the trial were published online by the Abbotsford News, a community newspaper in Abbotsford, British Columbia. It was revealed that Matthew confessed to Mr. Big that he had killed Rachel, with whom he shared the same father. The confession was recorded with hidden cameras. Wendy, the Crown representative, explained that on the night of the murder, Matthew had gone to Rachel's residence to apologize for abusing her when she was a child. He was 14 or 15 years old at the time of the assault and was found guilty at 19, receiving a sentence of probation, as disclosed in court. Wendy also detailed that Rachel had exchanged text messages with a friend, who asked how her conversation with Matthew was going. She replied that it had been a good, emotional conversation, but that she was very tired and hoped he would go home soon. Matthew saw this message and became enraged. The prosecutor continued, highlighting that Matthew confessed in 2016 to the undercover officer that Rachel's text message made it seem like she was the victim, while he felt he had suffered through the accusations and judicial process. To Matthew, the fact that he had sexually abused his sister when she was just a child seemed insignificant. Wendy explained that, in a fit of rage, Matthew hit Rachel on the head, immobilized her, and suffocated her by covering her mouth and nose with his hand. He then transported her body to his residence in Abbotsford, sexually assaulted the corpse, and disposed of it. After committing these crimes, Matthew tried to cover his tracks by sending text messages from Rachel's phone after her death and getting rid of her keys and other personal items. When it was the defense's turn, the defense attorney argued that the murder had been a traumatic event in Matthew's life, leading to panic attacks, sleepless nights, flashbacks, and nightmares, requiring treatment for depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which he was receiving in prison. He claimed that Matthew had an unstable childhood, shuffling between parents and grandparents, which generated a lot of unresolved anger and frustration. However, she stated that he could improve as he was participating in prison programs that helped him understand his issues. The courtroom was filled with Rachel's family and friends who had to listen to the horrific details recounted by the prosecutor about Rachel's suffering and the defense's argument portraying Matthew as a victim. Wendy then read the victim impact statements aloud, representing Rachel's sister, mother, and the father of her child, detailing the devastating emotional toll her death had taken on the family. On July 4, 2018, the judge agreed with the joint sentencing recommendation made by the Crown and defense attorneys during the June hearing. He stated before the British Columbia Supreme Court that he believed 13 years was an appropriate time for Matthew to become eligible for parole, based on sentences in similar cases. He emphasized that Matthew would still serve a life sentence, even if granted parole, as he would always be subject to certain conditions. He added that parole was never guaranteed and could be revoked. He described Matthew's actions as repulsive. After the court session, Rachel's sister expressed that her family felt relieved but mostly exhausted by the entire experience. She added that the family was not surprised by Matthew's guilty plea, as they had always suspected him, despite lacking evidence. Responding to Matthew's claims of suffering, Brittany emphasized that Rachel was the only victim and that Matthew could portray himself as a martyr to gain sympathy or pity, but he was not a victim. She stressed the importance of remembering this crucial fact. Perhaps the most poignant evidence of the tragedy's impact was contained in a letter the family provided to Sergeant Jennifer. In it, they expressed that Rachel was a mother, daughter, sister, and friend, and her absence had left many broken hearts and great devastation, as she was missed and remembered every day. They described Rachel as a sweet, strong, and beautiful young woman with her entire life ahead of her, but she would never get the chance to live out her dreams. They highlighted that her senseless murder left behind a child who would never know his mother and would one day need answers to questions no child should have to ask. The family noted they no longer had words to describe their pain or the difficulty of processing everything that had happened, and they requested privacy while expressing gratitude that justice was served, though nothing could ever compensate for the loss of Rachel's young life. Finally, Brittany said the family hoped to use their experience to help others going through similar tragic circumstances. She emphasized that there should be more support in such painful situations. She remarked that no mother should have to close her deceased daughter's bank account or receive mail addressed to her dead daughter in response to some bureaucratic procedure, as it was too difficult to bear. Brittany suggested that it would be very helpful to have someone designated to handle tasks such as making phone calls to various government agencies so that families wouldn't have to repeatedly explain that their loved one had passed away. She announced that, holding on to hope, the family was trying to focus on raising Marco, Rachel's son, who was 6 years old at the time of the sentencing and was as good and smart as his mother. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. A young girl vanishes from a close-knit community.
Where is 8-year-old Sandra Cantu?
Parents are in a state of panic as the police search for the missing girl.
Ahorita los niños no salen a jugar.
Even today, we don't let our children play out in the front yard, only in the backyard.
We're all searching frantically for 8-year-old Sandra Cantu.
Sandra Renee Cantu, born on March 8, 2001, was the daughter of Maria Chavez and Daniel Cantu, a couple of Hispanic origin. Sandra lived with her mother, grandparents, and 3 older siblings, 2 sisters aged 20 and 11, and a 15-year-old brother, in a trailer park named Orchard Estates. This park, consisting of about 100 homes, was known as a safe and family-friendly community in the city of Tracy. Sandra's father, Daniel, resided in Mexico and had limited contact with her. Tracy is a city in Northern California with a population of around 80,000 people. It is considered a suburb of the San Francisco Bay Area, with roughly 70% of its workforce employed in Silicon Valley, home to many emerging and global technology companies. Despite this, the city maintains strong agricultural roots, with crops such as tomatoes, alfalfa, and peaches. In the 1970s, Tracy had only 15,000 residents, but it grew in popularity and population as the Bay Area expanded. Sandra's family settled in this growing city. Sandra, a second grader at Melville Jacobson Elementary School, had long, light brown hair with golden highlights from spending a lot of time in the sun. She was a sweet, innocent, bright, and amiable child who loved visiting neighborhood friends, doing cartwheels, and reading children's books. Her friendly nature allowed her to make friends easily, and she was always ready to help. Her favorite character was Hannah Montana. On Friday, March 27, 2009, after school, the 8-year-old visited a friend's house before returning home around 4 p.m. to check in with her family. She then went out again, saying she was going to play at another friend's house. It was common for neighborhood kids to play at each other's homes and in the open spaces of the park, which included a basketball court and a pool. However, that evening was unusual because Sandra did not return home as expected, which was highly unusual for her. She always knew to check in with her mother by dinner time. The family grew increasingly anxious when they discovered that the friend Sandra mentioned was not home that afternoon. Sandra had never left the trailer park area before. At 7:53 p.m., the family, now very worried, called 911 to report Sandra missing. The police began their search at Sandra's home and expanded throughout the neighborhood. They collected footage from a surveillance camera near the family's residence, which showed Sandra crossing the street in front of her house. This video was broadcasted on national news channels to aid in the search. The police conducted a thorough search of the mobile home park and interviewed all residents but found no leads. The FBI joined the search over the weekend of March 28th and 29. Police dogs, rescue teams, all-terrain vehicles, and a California Highway Patrol helicopter were all involved in the intense search effort. More than 250 people from 13 different agencies participated. Divers searched a nearby lake, but found nothing. Officers went door to door in the park, questioning every resident and inspecting all vehicles. The search continued without pause. The authorities even offered a $22,000 reward for information about the case, but no traces of Sandra were found. The first suspect was a local man named Frank, who had been seen kissing Sandra on the lips 2 years earlier at the local pool when she was 6. Frank, about 60 years old, had been spotted by Sandra's grandmother in 2007, brushing her hair away and kissing her on the lips. The family had reported this incident at the time. With Sandra's disappearance, Frank was questioned by investigators. He claimed he had nothing to do with the incident and had kissed her only to be nice. The police seized some of his CDs as part of the investigation. Detectives also interviewed Sandra's father, Daniel Cantu, but he lived in Mexico and had minimal contact with his daughter, having not seen her for over a year. The tragic discovery came 10 days after Sandra's disappearance, on April 6, 2009. Agricultural workers draining a reservoir a few miles from the neighborhood, a task they perform twice a year, made a shocking find. At the bottom of the reservoir, measuring about 150 meters long and 30 meters wide, they found a suitcase. Inside was Sandra's body, curled in a fetal position. She was wearing the same clothes she had on when she went missing: a Hello Kitty t-shirt gifted by a neighbor for her birthday and black leggings. The horrifying crime stunned the residents of Tracy, leaving Sandra's family devastated. For days, dozens of people left flowers, posters, candles, and stuffed animals in her memory. An autopsy revealed that Sandra had been beaten and sexually assaulted with a foreign object before being asphyxiated. Toxicology reports showed she had ingested a powerful sedative. The suitcase was identified as belonging to Melissa Huckabee. FBI experts developed a preliminary profile of the suspect, believing it to be a white male between 25 and 40 years old, with a criminal history involving sexual assault or child pornography, who kidnapped for sexual purposes and then killed. They initially focused on all the men in the trailer park, but later turned their attention to a completely different suspect when they identified the suitcase's owner. Playing in the enemy's house, Melissa Huckabee was born on February 23, 1981, in Orange County, California. She was the eldest of 9 grandchildren. At 28 years old, Melissa was a volunteer Sunday school teacher at the Tracy Baptist Church, where her grandfather served as pastor. She grew up in Southern California and lived between Tracy and Orange County after high school. As an adult, she faced difficult times and struggled to find and keep a stable job. In 2002, Melissa Huckabee filed a restraining order against an ex-boyfriend, accusing him of harassment, death threats, and assaulting her grandfather. That chapter soon ended, and in August 2003, while 5 months pregnant, she married her then-boyfriend Johnny Huckabee. That same year, Melissa declared bankruptcy with debts totaling $26,300, including thousands of dollars in medical bills and credit card expenses. Her struggles continued as her marriage did not work out. They separated in August 2004 and their divorce was finalized in September 2005. Divorce documents revealed that Melissa accused Johnny of kidnapping their daughter and domestic violence, charges which Johnny vehemently denied. Despite this, Melissa gained full custody of their daughter, Madison. Melissa, always a loving mother with a strong religious upbringing, lived in Southern California, where she worked as an event planner and studied criminology at a community technical institute. She loved crime dramas, especially the popular series Law and Order. Despite her efforts, Melissa led a solitary life and had a history of mental health issues, including severe conditions such as borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. According to her family, she struggled to raise her daughter alone and sometimes experienced episodes of depression. Additionally, she had a history of self-harm, cutting her ankles to balance her mind. She was prescribed several potent medications, including benzodiazepines, amphetamines, and an antidepressant. Melissa also took furosemide, a diuretic used for heart problems and hypertension. In 2007, Melissa was considered a person of interest by police in connection with 2 fires in La Palma, California, about 300 miles from Tracy, but she was never charged. In June 2008, her grandparents asked Melissa to help them pack for a move to Tracy, changing her plans. She had lived in Tracy years earlier and decided to settle there again with Madison, moving into her grandparents' trailer. Sandra Cantu lived in the same neighborhood, just 5 houses away. In January 2009, a 7-year-old girl went missing for several hours in the trailer park, prompting a police report and an intense search that lasted several hours. Melissa eventually brought the girl home, but according to the family, the child appeared drugged. She could barely speak and cried incessantly, unable to stand or walk without assistance, collapsing each time she tried. Her parents took her to the hospital where tests revealed benzodiazepines in her bloodstream, medications typically prescribed as sedatives or to induce sleep, alleviate anxiety, muscle spasms, and prevent seizures. The family feared the girl had been sexually abused, but medical examination showed no evidence of this. A Tracy police officer interrogated Melissa, who reacted indignantly to the accusation. At the same time, it was revealed that the girl's mother had drug problems. With no evidence against Melissa, the case did not proceed. Another peculiar incident highlighted Melissa's odd behavior. She told a 37-year-old man she occasionally dated that she was pregnant, leading him to decide to marry her. Melissa even had the phone number of a bridal shop written in her notebook. On March 2, 2009, the couple met at the church, where Melissa gave Daniel a drink that he found to have a strange taste. He could not remember anything after that night. The police later found Daniel unconscious near a fast food restaurant. He woke up in jail but never reported Melissa. This incident occurred about 3 weeks before Sandra's death. On the day Sandra disappeared, while the police were searching the area, Melissa sent a text message to Maria, Sandra's mother, asking her to inform the police that something had been stolen from her house around 4 p.m. She added that she wasn't sure if this information would impact the investigation. Earlier, Melissa had called the manager of the trailer park to report a stolen black suitcase she claimed to have left outside her home. She even mentioned the stolen suitcase in media interviews. The day after Sandra vanished, during a vigil for her, a very agitated and tearful Melissa approached investigators, saying she found a note on the ground. The note, filled with spelling errors, read, "Cantu locked in a suitcase thrown in water on Bucketty Road and Whitehall Road. Witness." Suddenly, Melissa's demeanor changed, and she became completely calm, which caught the attention of the officers. At the time of Sandra's death, Melissa was on probation for a 2006 theft in Los Angeles, but she had no record of violent behavior. 2 days before Sandra's body was discovered, Melissa was admitted to a local hospital, claiming she had accidentally swallowed a razor blade while sleepwalking, which seemed to be a suicide attempt. Before Sandra's body was found, Melissa was not a primary suspect. She was interviewed several times, but the police believed she was merely seeking attention and had no evidence linking her to Sandra's disappearance. However, everything changed when Sandra's body was found in the very suitcase Melissa had reported stolen. Investigators then began to scrutinize Melissa's behavior more closely. Another crucial clue emerged when a retired Marine and his wife informed the police that they had seen Melissa in her SUV at the irrigation pond on their property at Bucketty and Whitehall Streets between 5:30 and 6 p.m. on March 27th. The couple recognized Melissa from television and noted that she appeared distracted and in a hurry when they saw her. Melissa had told them she stopped there because she needed to urinate. The police quickly continued reviewing the surveillance footage from the camera outside Sandra's house and observed that the girl was walking towards Melissa's house at 3:54 p.m. on March 27th. The camera also captured Melissa's SUV driving in the opposite direction 8 minutes later. Soon after, Melissa called the neighborhood manager to report a stolen suitcase. Around 5:30 p.m., a surveillance camera in the church parking lot recorded Melissa driving towards the irrigation pond, and half an hour later, she was seen returning. New evidence surfaced at the church when FBI agents conducted a thorough search and found a metal rolling pin in the kitchen with a blood stain and a bent handle. DNA analysis confirmed the blood matched Sandra's. They also discovered that the cord used to close the suitcase was the same type missing from the blinds in the Sunday school classroom. Investigators interviewed Melissa's grandfather and collected several items from the family home. On a computer at the house, they found a news article from September 2008 about Diverse finding a suitcase containing the remains of a missing 4-year-old girl. On April 9, 2009, Melissa was discharged from the hospital at 7 a.m. Later, she went to the police station for another round of questioning. After an hour, she was asked to return the next day. On April 10th, she underwent 6 hours of intense interrogation. Over time, Melissa broke down, transitioning from calm to distressed. She eventually admitted to causing Sandra's death, but fabricated an elaborate story of accidental death and panic. Melissa claimed that on that day, she intended to take the suitcase to the church, but encountered Sandra and decided to play hide and seek. She said she told Sandra to get into the suitcase, then zipped it up. According to her bizarre account, Melissa left her keys and cell phone, drove to the church, and forgot about Sandra. When she returned and opened the suitcase, she found the girl lifeless. She claimed she tried to revive her and placed a small towel on her forehead to cool her. Panicking, Melissa said she then decided to dump the suitcase in the reservoir. The story was obviously not credible, leading to Melissa's detention in the county jail. Initially, she broke down in tears but soon regained her composure. 4 days after her arrest, Melissa was charged with murder with special circumstances of rape with a foreign object, lewd acts with a minor, and murder during a kidnapping. According to the prosecutor's charges, Sandra's death was premeditated and malicious following sexual abuse. The police believed Sandra was heading to Melissa's house to play, as seen in the surveillance footage, and was killed shortly after arriving. However, the police could not establish a motive for the crime. The community was shocked by the news. It was hard to believe that a local resident, a mother whose child played with other neighborhood kids, could commit such a brutal act. Melissa even received death threats, prompting heightened security measures during her court appearances. The trial was marked by shock and disbelief. Melissa appeared in court for the reading of the charges, wearing a red prison jumpsuit and shackles. She had marks on her forehead, apparently self-inflicted, and she cried and trembled as the judge listed the charges. Given the nature of the accusations, she faced either the death penalty or life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Melissa's defense requested a court order for a medical evaluation of the accused and a gag order to prevent case details from influencing the jury. Many of Sandra's and Melissa's family members wept during the hearing, with immense pain evident, especially when the charge of rape was mentioned. Melissa reacted strongly, closing her eyes and stifling a sob. Her father expressed that the family was in shock and did not recognize Melissa as their own. Her ex-husband stated that although Melissa had struggled with emotional issues and had been medicated, he never believed she could be violent. He was utterly astonished by the charges against her. When he saw her in court, he did not recognize her. Johnny had no further contact with Melissa or their daughter and sought custody after Melissa's incarceration. He remarried and had other children. Following the charges, there were at least 3 hearings in which Melissa refused to plead guilty or not guilty, delaying the judicial process. Finally, in June, she pleaded not guilty. In August, the district attorney added more charges related to drugging a 7-year-old girl in 2007 and her ex-boyfriend Daniel in March 2009. In April 2010, the defense requested the exhumation of Sandra's body for a second autopsy, but eventually withdrew the request. The county's chief medical examiner explained that relevant samples had been preserved for independent analysis, should the defense wish to determine if Sandra had been raped. Finally, on May 10, 2010, nearly a year after pleading not guilty in a routine pre-trial hearing, 29-year-old Melissa changed her plea. She pleaded guilty to first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances of kidnapping. Melissa made a deal with the prosecution to drop the other charges against her, including lewd acts with a minor, rape, and drugging a 7-year-old girl and her ex-boyfriend. By admitting guilt, she aimed to avoid a potential death sentence. After the gag order was lifted, more details about how Melissa killed Sandra emerged. Based on the pathologist's report, the prosecutor stated that Sandra was suffocated with a piece of cloth soaked in alcohol. Authorities also found a blood-stained piece of fabric tied around Sandra's head and knotted with a rope. The cause of death was homicidal asphyxiation. According to prosecution documents, Melissa sedated Sandra, took her to the church, and sexually assaulted her with a foreign object, apparently the rolling pin that was found. Ultimately, Melissa was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of her sentencing, She could only say she did not understand why she committed the horrific crime. She acknowledged that she would have to struggle with that question for the rest of her life. Sobbing, she apologized to Sandra's family, admitting she should never have taken Sandra from them. Melissa said she owed them an explanation, but still couldn't comprehend her actions. She also stated that she would live with the fact that she killed a sweet, innocent girl like Sandra for the rest of her life. That day, Melissa denied raping Sandra. She told Sandra's mother that Sandra did not suffer and that there was no sexual abuse. She asked for her forgiveness, although she admitted she couldn't imagine forgiving someone who harmed her own child. However, Melissa's claims were contradicted by the pathologist's report, which revealed that Sandra had a cut on her lower lip, an abrasion on her elbow, and injuries to her genital area. Toxicology tests also found traces of a medication used to treat anxiety disorders in Sandra's body. It was also proven that Melissa had written the note indicating where Sandra's body was located in the suitcase. The lingering mystery remains. Why did she do it? Melissa's history of mental disorders seems key. She was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which affects how people feel about themselves and others, causing significant problems in everyday life. Those with the disorder often experience intense fear, impulsivity, and frequent mood swings. The prosecutor in the case speculated that Melissa killed Sandra simply to gain attention. The prosecutor suspected that Madison might also have been a victim of her mother. Madison had a history of frequent illnesses requiring hospital care. Moreover, Melissa had a record of self-harm and setting fires, and had verbally or psychologically attacked others to draw attention. According to the prosecution, after the murder, she achieved her goal of being the center of attention. Another theory suggested that jealousy was the motive, as Sandra was loved by everyone, whereas Madison, who meant everything to Melissa, did not garner the same admiration. These, however, are speculations. Investigators are certain it was a premeditated crime, and they believe Melissa had been practicing by drugging the other 7-year-old girl and her ex-boyfriend before ultimately killing Sandra. Melissa's case is notable not only for its cruelty, but also because it is rare for women to commit such crimes. Only between 5% and 15% of sexual predators are women. Furthermore, they rarely commit sexual offenses against children, and when they do, they are generally accomplices rather than perpetrators. Women are typically seen as nurturing and less threatening, so images of women accused of sexual abuse are particularly shocking to our sensibilities. According to the United States Department of Justice, approximately 1 in 10 homicides is committed by women. When women kill, it is more likely that their victims are close to them, such as their children, boyfriends, or spouses. The traditional role of women is to care, not to kill, and when a woman commits murder, it is more often in self-defense or due to some form of mental illness. Sandra's case defied all these paradigms, and Melissa's motivation for ending the child's life remains a mystery. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.